Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I didn't start looking for anything. I wasn't checking her phone or tracking where she went. That's not who I was. It just showed itself. I'd be sitting on the couch, halfway through a show we used to watch together, and she'd be in the other room, laughing into her phone. Not texting. Laughing. That kind of laugh that's more breath than voice. Intimate. Familiar. When I'd glance up, she'd already quieted, sometimes tucking the phone face down or sliding it under a throw pillow like it was second nature. No guilt or explanation. Just smooth transitions and a tight-lipped smile, like she was doing me a favor by even pretending. I don't know exactly when it all started feeling different, but I remember the moment I realized it wasn't stress or routine or some phase we'd pushed through. I was brushing my teeth one night, and she walked past the bathroom wearing a new dress I hadn't seen before. Tight, low cut, hair curled, perfume trailing her. She didn't stop to say where she was going. Just called out, "I'll be late," like I was the house sitter. I stared at my reflection for a while after she left. Toothbrush in hand, toothpaste foaming at the corners of my mouth. I looked like a man who was still pretending this was normal, that she just had a social life and I wasn't invited. The irony? I used to beg her to go out. Years ago, she'd mope about how we never did anything, how we were getting boring. I planned dinners, took her on random weekend drives, even learned how to cook one of her mom's favorite recipes just to shake things up. She rolled her eyes the first time I made it, said I used the wrong kind of rice. Now, she was out every other night. Not with names I recognized, either. Just vague labels, people from work, a few of the girls, or my personal favorite. It's nothing. I tried to give her space. Told myself it was just a phase, that maybe she needed a bit of freedom to reset. But the space I gave didn't pull her back. It became the distance she thrived in. The version of her I got at home felt like a placeholder. She moved through the rooms like a guest with no interest in small talk. If I asked about her day, she'd say, "Busy, same as always," while scrolling. If I tried to share something from mine, her eyes glazed over within seconds, like even pretending to care was exhausting. We hadn't touched each other in weeks, maybe months. And when I finally brought it up, asked if something was bothering her, she blinked, shrugged, and said, "Not everything's about you." I didn't even know what to say to that. I wasn't accusing her of anything. I wanted to understand. But she made me feel like I'd overstepped by even asking. After that, I stopped trying. Conversations became practical. Did you grab the mail? Are we out of detergent? What time is your meeting Thursday? We weren't fighting. We were fading. And the more I pulled back, the lighter she seemed. I started noticing the patterns. How she'd come home and immediately vanish into the bedroom for 20 minutes before re-emerging in sweats and wiping her lipstick off with the back of her hand. How her energy lit up when her phone buzzed but flatlined when I walked into the room. I remember one Saturday night, she said she was going to dinner with coworkers. I offered to drive her, said I didn't mind. She declined instantly, said someone else was picking her up. When I asked who, she said, "A friend," and grabbed her purse without looking at me. The door clicked shut behind her, and I just sat there. The silence in that moment was louder than any fight we'd ever had. And I wish I could say I felt angry. I wish I slammed something or stormed out or called a buddy to vent. But I didn't. I just sat on the edge of the couch with my hands resting on my knees, staring at nothing, realizing that I had officially become background noise in my own home. I stayed up that night longer than I should have. Every time I heard a car drive by, I checked the window. Not because I didn't trust her. I wanted to know what version of her would walk through the door. Would it be the one who barely spoke? The one who smelled like expensive cocktails and perfume that wasn't for me? Or the one who'd fake a yawn and say, "You're still up?" before disappearing into the bathroom with her phone clutched to her chest? She came home at 1:15 a.m. I heard the key turn and the quiet shuffle of her heels in one hand, keys in the other. She didn't say anything as she walked past me in the hallway. She looked surprised to see me awake, then annoyed. Like I'd intruded on a script where she expected me to be asleep and clueless. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled beside me, screen glow reflecting off her expressionless face. And I knew something inside me had shifted. It wasn't jealousy or suspicion. It was something colder than that. Clarity. She didn't even try to hide it that night. No half-baked excuses. Just the clumsy jingle of keys in the door and the unmistakable sound of someone trying too hard to move quietly. I didn't say anything. I'd already been sitting in the armchair near the hallway for almost an hour, The room dark except for the faint street light bleeding in through the blinds. The TV was off. My phone untouched. I just sat there, listening to the hum of a refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards. When the lock clicked and the door finally eased open, I didn't move. I watched her silhouette stumble in, heels dangling from one hand, clutching her purse with the other. Her eyes hadn't adjusted yet, so she didn't see me right away. She exhaled, slow and heavy, like someone coming down from a performance. Her phone buzzed in her purse, but she didn't check it this time. She leaned against the wall and ran her hand through her hair, muttering something under her breath. That's when I stood up. She flinched a little when I stepped into view. Just a brief flicker of surprise. Her hand tightened around the strap of her purse as she adjusted to the fact that she wasn't alone. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You're still up?" I didn't answer. She looked down at her feet, then back at me. Her makeup was smudged, one earring missing, the strap of her dress sliding off her shoulder. She looked like someone who hadn't planned on being seen like this. I wasn't shocked. I was done pretending. The silence between us stretched. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, then finally said, "Look, I know how this looks." I didn't let her finish. I didn't ask questions. I walked past her, slow and measured, and went straight to the dining table. She followed, still holding her heels, her steps hesitant now. I reached for the manila envelope I'd placed there earlier that evening and set it down in the center of the table. She glanced at it, confused at first. Then her eyes locked on the bold lettering printed across the top of the document. Petition for divorce. Her breath caught. She blinked twice, once fast, once slow, like her brain was still catching up to her eyes. "You're serious?" she asked, voice quieter now. Still, I said nothing. She stared at the papers like they might explain themselves. I could see her shoulders lift as she inhaled, trying to steady herself. She placed her purse on the chair and finally put her heels down. She was trying to buy time, trying to think. "It's not what you think," she said, softer now, almost pleading. But I didn't ask her what I thought. I hadn't accused her of anything. That's what made it so telling. Her instinct wasn't to ask why or how or even to deny. It was to explain, to defend something I hadn't even voiced. And that told me everything. I leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, watching her process. She flipped open the top page, skimmed the first paragraph, and then looked up at me like I had just betrayed her. "Are you really doing this?" she asked. I didn't flinch or nod, because it was already done. She stepped toward me, slow and unsure, like she wasn't sure how to play it. Maybe she thought she could talk me down. "You've been acting distant," she said, trying to regain footing. "I know things haven't been great, but I thought we could." She paused. "This isn't like you." I almost laughed at that. Not out loud. Just this small, bitter amusement that she still believed she knew who I was, after everything. After all the quiet dismissals. After every night I lay next to a woman who acted like I didn't exist unless she needed something. What wasn't like me? Not confronting her at 2 a.m. when she came home smelling like vodka and someone else's cologne? Not asking where she'd been when I already knew it wouldn't be the truth? She looked down again, her voice faltering. "You're really not going to say anything?" Still nothing. Because what was left to say? She was staring at the papers now, but she wasn't reading anymore. She was just looking, frozen. That was the moment the panic started to creep in. Her lips parted slightly, and she looked up again like she might cry, but the tears didn't come. She was shocked, maybe even insulted that I hadn't given her a fight. That's the part that broke something in her. The realization that she didn't get to control the ending. I reached for the small duffel bag I'd packed earlier. Just a few essentials. Nothing breathtaking. As I turned to leave, she stepped toward me again. "Can we at least talk?" she asked, quieter now. I paused, hand on the doorknob. I looked at her. Not the version of her I remembered from when we first met. That version of her didn't exist anymore. This one, this woman standing barefoot in a dimly lit hallway, clutching the life she thought she could always return to. She was a stranger, so I gave her the only answer I had left. "You had months to talk," I said, voice calm. "You used them to leave me in pieces. I'm using tonight to walk away whole." And then I opened the door. Her voice didn't follow me. She didn't call my name or chase after me. She just stood there, stunned, still holding a purse she didn't need and shoes that couldn't carry her back to what we used to be. The night air felt cold on my face as I stepped outside, but for the first time in a long time, I breathed easy. Because it was over. She didn't bring it up the next morning. Not the papers or fact that my side of the closet was half empty. She acted like it hadn't happened at all. I came back early the next morning, quiet and measured, just to pick up a few things I hadn't grabbed the night before. Some documents, an old leather wallet I'd left in the drawer, a charger. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee, still wearing the same robe from the night before, like the past 12 hours were a regular Thursday night. I didn't speak, and neither did she. Just a tight nod when our eyes met, like she was trying to figure out what script to follow now. Whether to pretend it was a bad dream, or maybe hope I'd crack and ask for an explanation. I picked up what I came for and left. Over the next few days, I stayed with a friend across town. Just a spare room and a twin bed with a broken window latch that rattled in the wind. But the silence there felt better than the silence I'd lived in for the past year. That silence at home? It was the kind that follows emotional erosion. Quiet not from peace, but from avoidance. The kind that settles when love has been wrung dry and routine has taken its place. But now, there was a new silence. This one came with clarity. Distance. The kind you earn when you finally stop chasing someone who keeps walking away. By the third day, she started texting again. Small things at first. Do you want me to drop off your blue jacket at work? I noticed you forgot your watch. No mention of the documents sitting on the table. No comment about the decision I'd already made. She was circling it like it might dissolve if she stayed vague enough. I didn't reply. I didn't have anything left to offer. Not explanations or space to make excuses. And I think that's when it started to dawn on her. Because 2 days later, I got a call. That meant something. She hadn't called me in weeks before this. Everything was short bursts of information, grocery reminders, out with friends, late at work. But now my phone rang, and her name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her tone was lighter than expected. Too rehearsed. Hey, so I just wanted to talk, if you have time. No pressure. Just thought maybe we could clear the air. Let me know. That phrase, clear the air, sat in my chest like a rock. There was no fog left to clear. We'd been living in the aftermath of emotional neglect for over a year. The damage wasn't from one night or one outing or even one betrayal. It was from every moment she made me feel like a roommate who had overstayed his welcome. I waited 2 more days before replying. When I did, I kept it short. We'll talk. Just not now. And that's when her messages changed. They became longer, less casual. She started asking questions. Are you serious about this? Are you really going to throw everything away? Don't you think we owe it to ourselves to at least talk before doing something this permanent? That last one made me pause. Permanent. Funny how that word finally had weight now that she wasn't the one in control of the outcome. The following weekend, I came back to the house to collect more of my things. She was there, waiting. I could tell she'd been trying to set the stage. Her hair was brushed, face bare like she wanted to look sincere. She was wearing that soft blue sweater she knew I liked. Candle burning in the kitchen, like she thought she could rewind everything with a new tone. I didn't sit down. She offered tea. I declined. She gestured toward the papers still on the table, now creased at the corners from being moved around. I didn't touch them, she said. I nodded. You haven't said much, she continued, eyes scanning my face. I've just been trying to give you space, but I think we should. You had all the space. I interrupted, not loud. You just didn't think I'd use it to leave. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I walked past her, grabbed a box from the hall closet, and started filling it, slow and methodical. She stayed near the table, arms crossed now, defensive. So that's it, she asked. You're just done? I paused without turnaround. I've been done, I said quietly. I didn't realize it until the silence finally started making more sense than your voice. She stepped forward, her tone shifting. We had problems. Everyone does. You never said anything. That made me turn to her. I said everything, I replied. You just stopped listening. That was the first time she looked genuinely stunned, like I'd knocked the wind out of her without raising a hand. I didn't cheat, she whispered, as if that was the line that determined right and wrong. I nodded again. Maybe not. But you left long before I did. You just had the comfort of staying in the house. There was no begging. Just that quiet devastation when someone realizes their safety net has been cut without ceremony. I finished packing what I needed, closed the box, walked to the door. As I reached for the handle, she asked the one question I didn't expect. Are you sure? I looked back at her, messy bun, soft sweater, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in a long time. Regret. And for once, it wasn't mine. Yeah, I said. I'm sure. I stepped outside without looking back. The sun was still low, casting long shadows across the driveway. It was quiet, peaceful, final. That was the day she realized she wasn't the one deciding anymore. And that's when the divorce stopped being a threat in her mind and started becoming her reality. She started showing up in places she never used to. I'd run into her outside my office building, pretending to be nearby for something unrelated. Or she'd text on a Sunday afternoon, asking if I was planning to be home so she could drop something off. Always framed like she wasn't trying to undo what had already unraveled. The strange part? She never asked outright for me to come back. She didn't say, "I miss you." It was like she was still hoping to steer the story back to something salvageable without admitting she'd ever driven it off course. But the tone had shifted. I could see it in her eyes the last time I opened the door and found her standing there, holding a plastic bag of things I hadn't asked for. A couple of books, a hoodie I didn't even remember owning. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight she used to throw around so easily was starting to press back against her. "I thought you might need these," she said. I took the bag without saying much. Nodded. She lingered in the doorway like she wanted an invitation that wasn't coming. "Are you really not going to come inside?" she asked. "I don't live here anymore," I said. She flinched, barely noticeable, but it was there. Later that evening, I looked through the bag. There was a card tucked into one of the book covers. Blank inside, except for a single line written in her familiar handwriting. "We were better than this." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. I kept thinking, what part of this did she believe we were better than? The version where I stayed silent? The nights she came home and barely spoke? The months I spent trying to feel close to someone who treated me like background noise? Or maybe she meant the moment I finally stopped asking for connection and simply walked away. I didn't reply. Not to the texts that came after, not even when she tried calling again. She didn't understand that it wasn't about punishing her. But there was nothing left to keep score over. What I felt now wasn't pain, it was absence. A kind of calm that settles in when the storm has already passed and you're just left with the wreckage. And in that stillness, I started rebuilding. Not with someone new, but with routines. With small steps toward a life that didn't center around waiting to be noticed. I started waking up earlier, cooking meals again. I even took a trip out of town, something I hadn't done in years without planning it around her schedule or waiting for her to be interested. It was strange at first. The freedom, the silence that used to ache now felt like air I could finally breathe. Then came the night she called from outside the house. Not the one we shared, the one I was staying in temporarily. I saw her headlights from the kitchen window. She didn't knock at first, just sat there, engine running, like she was debating whether to follow through. Eventually, I opened the front door and walked out. She stepped out of the car, slowly. No makeup, hair pulled back, just a tired expression and hands stuffed in her coat pockets. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. "You could have stayed home," I replied. She looked up at me then, and I saw something crack in her expression. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she admitted. That sentence should have hit me. Months ago, it might have. I would have taken it as an opening, as a sign that maybe she was finally being honest. But all I felt was tired. "You've been alone for months," I said gently. "I was right there, and you chose distance every time." She took a shaky breath. "I didn't know it was this serious." I gave a short nod. "Because you didn't think I'd leave." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "Can we talk?" I shook my head. "We've had all the time in the world to talk. But it only works if both people are listening." "I was scared," she said. And there it was. The excuse. The fallback. The line that makes it sound like the betrayal was an accident. "Scared of what?" I asked. "Of losing myself. Of becoming someone who just..." She stopped, unsure how to finish. I didn't rescue her from the silence. "I thought I needed space to figure things out," she continued, more desperate now. "I didn't know you'd take that as a reason to leave. You didn't leave the door open for anything else." She stood there, shivering slightly, the chill in the air starting to creep into her shoulders. But she didn't ask to come in. "I don't want a divorce," she said finally. "I didn't either," I answered. "I just wanted a partner." She looked down at the ground, nodding slowly. Her eyes were wet now, but she wasn't crying. Not fully. Just standing there, in the middle of the night, finally realizing this wasn't a phase. "This doesn't feel real," she whispered. "It's been real," I said. "You never thought it would catch up to you." We stood in silence after that. She didn't move. Neither did I. Eventually, I turned and walked back to the door. Before I stepped inside, I said one last thing. You can keep the house. She looked up, confused. What? I don't want it. Too many ghosts. And then I closed the door behind me. This time, she didn't follow. She stayed in the driveway for a while. I could see her silhouette through the curtains. Then the headlights flared, and she was gone. Not with an apology. Just quietly, the same way I had slipped out of her life months ago. Only now she was finally beginning to understand what that actually meant. She didn't try again after that night. No more unannounced visits. No more carefully worded messages pretending to be casual. The silence returned, but this time, it wasn't mine. This one belonged to her. She was the one watching from the other side now, waiting for a message that wouldn't come. I imagined her sitting in the house we once shared, noticing the empty space I used to fill, not just physically, but in the way I moved around that place, fixing things, carrying groceries, trying to keep a connection alive that she quietly let go of. Now, there was no one checking in. No one asking about her day. I wasn't angry. The anger had burned out somewhere in the middle of all those quiet nights I'd spent lying awake beside her while she faced the wall, scrolling endlessly or pretending to sleep. Anger needs friction, and all we'd had left by the end was space. The final divorce hearing was uneventful. She showed up looking tired, like she hadn't slept. I showed up looking like myself, just calm. She didn't say much to me in the hallway outside the courtroom, just a short glance and a nod, like she'd finally accepted there wasn't going to be a last-minute rescue. No breakdown or passionate argument. Just a signing, a stamp, and the end of something that had been dying long before either of us admitted it. Afterward, I walked out alone. The cool morning air was sharp, but I took my time getting back to the car. I sat there for a minute, engine off, just listening to the silence. It wasn't sad. It just was. The sound of a life shifting into something new. I started putting small pieces of myself back together. The version of me I'd shelved to keep the peace. The man who had stopped doing things he loved because it didn't fit her preferences or plans. He started showing up again. I reconnected with old friends. Not an emotional, I'm back kind of way. Just casual texts. A beer here, a lunch there. Real conversations that didn't feel like I was walking on eggshells. People who asked how I was doing and actually listened. I dusted off the old camera I used to carry everywhere back in college. I started taking photos again. Quiet streets, hands in motion, light falling through windows in a way that felt worth capturing. There was a slowness to it all. Not a recovery. More like a reentry. No rebounds or dating apps. I wasn't interested in recreating something that had left me so worn down. I wanted to figure out who I was again without her narrative weighing down every thought. Occasionally, I'd hear from someone mutual, friends who still followed both of us online or caught wind of things through the usual social loops. One of them mentioned she'd started going out less. Another said she was asking around about therapy. Whether that was true or just well-meaning gossip, I didn't ask for more. Whatever realization she was coming to, it was hers to sit with. She'd had her chance to reach for something real. But instead, she'd spent her time testing how far she could push before I'd push back. She never expected silence to be the breaking point. That's what I kept thinking about. How we didn't end in chaos, but in the calm absence of effort. The kind of neglect that builds slowly, quietly, until the rope just slips from your hand and you barely notice the tension is gone. One night, a few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a text from an unfamiliar number. I saw your photos online. You still have that, I hope you're doing okay. There was no name attached, but I knew who it was. I didn't reply, because I finally didn't need anything from her. Not clarity or closure. She could have all the conclusions she wanted. I just wasn't going to be the one giving them. The last thing I did was cancel my name from the joint utilities. Final loose ends. I clicked through the account screens, made the calls, signed off. That's when I realized I hadn't thought about her in days. That moment hit harder than anything else. Not the divorce or heartbreak, but the fact that my mind had finally stopped orbiting her gravity. I could wake up and drink my coffee without checking the time to see if she'd need the kitchen soon. I could sit in silence without wondering if she'd ever speak first again. I could walk into a room and know I wasn't being tolerated. That kind of peace isn't loud. It doesn't throw a party when it arrives. It just settles in. Quiet. Steady. Funny how something as final as divorce didn't end with shouting or slammed doors. It ended with a signature. With an envelope on the table. With a woman standing barefoot at midnight, heels in one hand, holding a purse full of lies, staring at the man she never thought would leave. And me? I walked away, not to punish her, but because I finally remembered that I was allowed to choose myself. She thought I'd always be there, but she learned too late. Some men don't raise their voice. They just raise the standard and leave, quietly, completely, forever.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.